Before you scroll away, let me ask you something important. Have you ever believed in something with your whole heart, and then life showed up and quietly took it away? Please don't skip this. What I'm about to share didn't come from theory or religion class. It took me 75 years of living to understand. And whether you believe deeply, barely, or not at all, this will matter to you. My name is Russell. I'm 75 years old. And for most of my life, one question has followed me everywhere, even when I tried to ignore it. What do I actually believe, and why? I grew up in a home where faith wasn't discussed, it was assumed. Sundays were mandatory. Church pews felt as familiar as our living room couch. My father held responsibility in the church. My mother taught children, and I memorized verses before I fully understood the words. Back then, belief felt solid, certain, safe. Doubt wasn't dangerous. It simply didn't exist. But life doesn't respect certainty. When I was 23, my closest friend died suddenly in a car accident. One moment he was alive, kind, generous, always helping others, and the next, he was gone. At his funeral, people said all the expected things, words about purpose, God's plan, a better place. I stood there listening, and something inside me broke. I wasn't just grieving, I was angry, because none of those words answered the one question screaming in my chest. Why him? He was better than me in so many ways, and yet he was gone. That's when the questions started, real ones, the kind you're not supposed to ask out loud. I stopped accepting answers just because they were familiar. I began reading, not obsessively, not academically, but honestly. I explored different faiths, different philosophies, and even perspectives that rejected belief entirely. What surprised me wasn't how different they were. It was how often they circled the same human struggle, the need for meaning, the fear of loss, the desire to feel connected to something greater than ourselves. Years later, I worked closely with a man whose faith was different from mine. At first, I kept my distance without realizing why. But one late night, working side by side, we talked about prayer, discipline, charity, and surrender. And as he spoke, I felt something unsettling. He wasn't describing a foreign belief. He was describing the same longing I felt when I prayed. Different language, different rituals, same hunger. That realization shook me, because if that was true, then maybe belief was bigger and more fragile than I'd ever been taught. Because what I discovered next forced me to confront a hard truth. Some beliefs don't bring people closer to God. They quietly push them further away. As my questions grew louder, another truth started to surface, one I couldn't ignore anymore. Belief wasn't just shaping people, it was separating them. Not dramatically at first, quietly, in conversations that stopped too early, in friendships that never went deeper, in the unspoken rule that some questions were better left unasked. I noticed how careful people became around doubt, how quickly curiosity was labeled dangerous. Faith, something meant to bring clarity, had slowly turned into a line you weren't supposed to cross. Years ago, I worked with a man named Ahmed. He was openly Muslim, deeply committed to his faith, and without realizing it, I kept him at a distance. Not because of anything he did, but because of ideas I'd absorbed without examining. One evening we stayed late finishing a project. The office was nearly empty. No distractions, just two tired men talking honestly. He spoke about prayer, not as obligation, but as grounding. About discipline, about charity, about surrendering the ego to something larger than yourself. And suddenly I felt something shift. Different words, different rituals, but the same human longing I'd felt my entire life. That moment didn't erase our differences, but it exposed a lie I'd lived with for years. That truth only lived inside familiar boundaries. At the same time, I couldn't ignore what I was seeing elsewhere. Families breaking apart over belief. Young people shut down for asking honest questions. Faith used as justification for control, judgment, even cruelty. No long debates, no dramatic speeches, just damage, quiet and permanent. That's when it became clear. The problem wasn't belief, it was what happened when belief hardened, when certainty became more important than compassion, when answers mattered more than people. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that doubt was failure, that questioning meant weakness, that faith meant never admitting uncertainty. But the more I watched, the more convinced I became those ideas didn't create stronger humans. They created fearful ones, defensive ones, people more interested in being right than being kind. And that realization scared me, because I could feel it happening inside myself too. The same faith that once brought comfort had the power to close my heart if I let it. And then, at the lowest point I'd ever faced, something happened that left me no choice but to confront my faith or lose it entirely. By the time I turned 50, life had quietly cornered me. Nothing dramatic on the surface, no single catastrophe, just pressure, constant and heavy. My marriage was strained. Money was tight. I was drinking more than I admitted to anyone. And underneath it all was a feeling I couldn't name. Failure. Not moral failure. Existential failure. I had done everything I was told to do. Built a life. Stayed responsible. Played my role. And yet I felt empty. Like I'd been following instructions that no longer applied. One night, long after midnight, I found myself alone in my garage. The house was silent, everyone asleep. I remember sitting there, staring at nothing in particular, feeling the weight of years pressing down on my chest. And for the first time in a very long time, I prayed. Not the polished prayers I'd learned growing up. No memorized verses, no religious language, just honesty. I said, I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't know if you're real. I don't even know if this matters. But I can't carry this alone. That was it. No confidence, no certainty, just surrender. Nothing supernatural happened. No voice, no sign, no sudden peace. The night ended exactly the same way it began. But the next morning, something small but strange happened. A neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. No reason, no agenda. We ended up talking for hours about stress, about addiction, about how easily life slips out of control without you noticing. He told me about his own struggles, about getting help, about resources I didn't know existed. Was that God? Was it coincidence? Was it just human kindness? I still don't know. And for the first time, I realized something surprising. Maybe I didn't need to know, because that moment taught me something my younger self never would have accepted. That certainty wasn't what saved me. Honesty did. Humility did. Admitting I was lost did. The older I get, the less convinced I am that faith is about having the right explanations. I don't know what happens after we die. I don't know which traditions are correct. I don't know which prayers carry more weight. What I do know is this: pretending you have answers when you don't slowly breaks you. And something shifted that morning. Not belief, perspective. I stopped demanding clarity from the mystery and started responding to it differently. Because losing certainty didn't make my life smaller. It opened the door to something far more unsettling and far more human. As the years passed, something unexpected happened. Belief found its way back to me, not as certainty, not as arguments, but as presence. I stopped thinking of God as something I needed to prove or defend. Instead, I started noticing Him in quiet, ordinary moments. In patience I didn't used to have. In restraint where anger once lived. In help that arrived only after I admitted I couldn't carry everything on my own. A friend checking in at the exact wrong or right moment. A stranger's kindness that asked for nothing back. A quiet sunrise that made me pause longer than usual. None of it dramatic, all of it real. I came to believe God exists not because I solved the mystery, but because the mystery kept reaching back. Not through signs that demand applause, through people, through timing, through love that shows up when pride steps aside. Over time, one truth became impossible to ignore. Faith was never meant to make us certain. It was meant to shape who we become. I've prayed in churches. I've sat quietly beside people of other faiths. I've listened to skeptics who live with remarkable integrity. Different paths, same realization. If God is real, and I believe He is, then love is the clearest language we have to describe Him. Not fear, not control, not the need to be right. Love. A faith that softens you, that slows your judgment, that teaches you to listen before speaking. That's a faith that reflects God, not one that replaces Him. There are still things I can't explain. I don't understand suffering. I can't map out the afterlife. I don't know why some prayers are answered quietly while others are met with silence. But I do believe this. God is not threatened by doubt. He is not offended by honest questions. And He does not vanish when certainty fades. If anything, He feels closer then. What matters most isn't how perfectly you can describe God. It's how your belief changes the way you treat the people right in front of you. Because faith that leads to cruelty has lost its direction, and faith that leads to love is never wasted. I'm 75 years old now. I don't feel like someone who has everything figured out. I feel like someone who finally understands what matters. God is real, bigger than our arguments, quieter than our confidence, and closer than we think. In the final moments of my life, the only question that truly matters is this: who did I love well, and what will I leave behind? If there's one thing I hope you take from my life, it isn't an answer. It's permission. Permission to question without shame. Permission to believe without fear. Permission to admit you don't have it all figured out. For most of my life, I thought faith meant certainty. I thought doubt was something to fix or hide. Now I understand it differently. Doubt didn't pull me away from God. It forced me to seek Him honestly. And that search changed me. Not all at once, slowly, quietly. In the way I speak to people, in the way I listen, in the way I choose kindness, even when it costs me something. I've learned that belief isn't proven by how loudly you defend it, but by how gently you live it. If your faith makes you more patient, more compassionate, more willing to forgive, then it's doing its work. If it makes you smaller, harsher, or afraid of questions, then something needs healing. That's true whether you sit in a church, a mosque, a temple, or nowhere at all. I look at the world now and see so many people exhausted by arguments, tired of being told they're wrong, tired of carrying expectations they never chose. And I want you to hear this from someone who's lived long enough to make mistakes and survive them. You are allowed to search. You are allowed to outgrow beliefs that no longer bring life. And you are allowed to return to faith in a way that finally feels honest. God doesn't need you to be perfect. He doesn't need you to be certain. He only asks that you be sincere. Somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to win debates about God and started trying to live in a way that reflected Him. Loving people when it's inconvenient, listening when it's uncomfortable, staying humble when I'd rather feel right. That's the faith I believe in now. I don't know how much time I have left. None of us do. But I know this. When my time comes, I won't be thinking about the arguments I won or the doctrines I defended. I'll be thinking about faces, moments, people I chose to love when it mattered. So wherever you are on your journey, certain, unsure, searching, or skeptical, don't stop asking the big questions. Don't let anyone shame you for them. Stay curious, stay humble, love people well, because in the end, that may be the truest sign of faith there is.